Welcome everybody to the next episode of Search Off the Record podcast. Our plan is to talk a bit about what's happening at Google Search, how things work behind the scenes, and maybe have some fun along the way. My name is Martin Splitt, a search advocate on the search relations team here at Google in Switzerland. Today, I'm joined by Gary.
Good day.
And Lizzi.
Hey.
Both are also on the search relations team. In this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about De-SEOing, what it is, why people don't like to talk about it, and how to do it.
Martin.
Yeah?
I have a question to you.
Uh-oh. Is it JavaScript?
No, it's more important.
Okay, that's good.
Have you ever been a pie? No, wait, wrong question. Have you ever been to a Turkish prison? No, wait. Have you ever made a pie and then left it on the window to let it cool? And then the birds came and the ants came and eat it all.
Yeah.
That happens very often, right?
Yeah, like on a daily basis. I mean, do you like ants? Do you want to have ants? Because that's how you get ants. But no, we did have ants because of things that I left out for a while. But what does this have to do with this podcast?
Oh, nothing. I just like to talk about pies.
Okay.
No,
right.
Wait. So the ants, they are the wrong audience for your pie, right? Because when you make pie, you obviously want me over there and have some pie, not the ants, correct?
If I have to choose between ants and you, I'm not so sure, but I get your idea.
What? That's mean.
Sorry, Gary. Of course I want you to have my pie.
Well, now I don't believe you. But anyway, they are still the wrong audience. And that is something that happens on the web as well, to some extent. And we noticed that with Lizzi on developers.google.com/search site that we like to call onesie because it's easier to say.
Right. But why don't you want as much traffic as possible on our documentation?
Because some traffic is the wrong kind of traffic.
How so?
So with traffic, usually what you want is to have it convert. In case of search documentation or developer documentation, that would be they complete some action as a result of reading the documentation. And if they are, for example, reading the wrong kind of documentation because we optimized for something that we shouldn't have, then they are not going to be able to complete said action. And I think we have quite a few examples for this, but one prominent one was the removals documentation. If you think about it, there are at least 2 tools, maybe 3, where you can remove search results, for example. Those 3 tools' documentation should be optimized differently for different keywords, so they attract the right kind of traffic from search engines.
So that the people use the right tools for what they're trying to accomplish.
Right. I think we could take a step back, actually, to talk about how we discovered this was an issue, because it was not necessarily that we just looked at our analytics to see, oh, we are having too much traffic and we don't want that. It was actually
Wait, what?
another
That's what
problem.
I said.
No, well, I'm saying this. So we were getting buckets of feedback reported to us through our send feedback button that were people saying, can you remove this picture of me on Instagram, or all these other use cases that we were just like, well, this is not the flow that you should, like, how did you arrive here, first of all? Second of all, the document that is here is not going to help you on this journey. And we wanted to help those people find the right point, but also make sure that our doc was actually getting viewed by the people that it should be getting viewed by.
So what you're saying is that to identify the traffic that we don't want on our pages, you had to add a feedback functionality so that we got feedback on what people thought the intention of the doc was, and then we saw that that mismatched with what the doc actually intended to do.
Yeah, like how the problem arrived to us was not necessarily us looking at data in a vacuum. We were looking at other things and then thought, hey, actually, I think that one way that this is that could be solved is if we were to de-SEO this part of our site, because we saw that a large amount of our traffic was coming from search. And then we investigated, like, what does it look like when you search for remove something from search? And our page was at the top, and we didn't necessarily want that for generic type query.
That is fascinating, because normally people would like die for getting on the top of search results. And now you're saying, oh, we really want to get out of it for this specific query.
I think because it was causing us other problems. So if we're like looking at like our site as a business, like this was causing us to have way too many support requests that we were not the right fit to even address. So the SEO could help in a different way than just like more traffic.
So besides querying what people would use to get to the page and figuring out the queries that we don't want and looking at feedback, was there anything else that you did to further identify the traffic that you got that you didn't want, or was that sufficient?
We also looked at other sources of analytics. So we have this other point in our documentation next to this send feedback button where you can give a rating for, was this page helpful? So you can say thumbs up, like, yes, it was helpful, or thumbs down, it was not helpful. And this page had really unhappy people. So usually our stat is like 75% find this helpful. And this page was like 50%. So we thought, okay, like people, like we're having a lot of people come to this page. They're unhappy. And then they're also writing into us to ask us to remove, like just pasting in like, this is the image, or like, this is the page that I want you to remove. And it was clear to us that like based off of the way that they were phrasing the request, that they're not the website owner of that page. And the purpose of our page was for website owners. Like if this is a page that you own and you don't want it showing up in search results, this is the flow that you should do.
What did you do to fix that? Because it sounds like you figured out a way to get out of that situation.
Yes, that is true. So one of the things that we did was to partner with the SEO team inside of Google. I'm not sure how we're supposed to be referring to that group, but we've talked about in the past how we've worked with the other SEOs at Google to optimize our pages or get advice about what we should do. So we brought this to them to say like, hey, this is, we would like to optimize the title and description for this page. And then also on the page, do some reworking to make sure that it is actually addressing the audience that we want to address. Because before, the title of the page was something super generic, like remove information from search results, which is like, okay, like that seems accurate, like that we would be showing up for that type of query, but the actual content on the page was more for website owners. So we changed the content on the page to be focused more for website owners. So like your web page, remove your web page from search, like targeted with the words on the page. So that was one thing.
So you made the content more relevant to the right kind of audience.
Yes.
What confused me, and maybe Gary knows this better than I do, is why did we get this traffic in the first place? Like it sounds relatively clearly like a mismatch between what the page was aiming for and what people wanted.
I mean, what people wanted, that's very relative, right? Like a search engine can't actually tell most of the time what exactly the person wants. It's more like a guessing game. And then you decide to show, for example, refinements or something to have the user get to the right page. But in this case, it's really not obvious what they want. If they search for remove page from Google, then if you have a matching document, then you will serve that, and that's it. But in this case, it was like we had at least 2 matching documents, because we also had in the consumer help center, like the user help center, we also had a document for removing search results. Then we had our own page, and probably we also had a legal removal help documentation as well. And then from there, Google and other search engines had to figure out which one to send the users to. And then ours was the most generically optimized page, and then we got all the traffic. And the removals, it's like we call out removals, but it's not an isolated thing. I think we also see this with videos where we get traffic that is seeking YouTube help, for example, because perhaps the YouTube documentation is not as optimized as ours for generic video or video queries.
You know, you keep saying generic queries or that our page is generic, but we also have like the word developers shows up in our site name and then also in the domain. So like, would that make our thing seem more technical in nature? And why would we be showing up for these like consumer facing queries? Like, why can't Google just figure it out and know that our thing is for technical people? Or like, if you are doing something with your website, like show us. Why did we have to do something additional?
Well, but we don't know if the user is a developer or not. From search perspective, we don't know if the user is a developer or a user, an end user. And also that you can't trust too much the domain name, because if you trust it too much, you are going to have a very bad time in ranking. For example, I own spammyguy.com. Do you think I'm spammy? Don't answer that. But just don't. You just can't trust domain names usually. Back in the Matguts era, even, where we took away trust from domain names so they rank less for the words that appear in the domain name, because we observed that people were exploiting the ranking benefits that domain names gave and in general URLs. And we ended up with Spammy Guy ranking for canned spam, for example. And you definitely don't want that.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so I see that there is the issue of queries with a very generic query intention and then pages which are optimized for these generic topics. And if we have those, we get traffic that we don't want on these pages. So we kind of optimize them by de-optimizing them in a way. Like we got less traffic. Okay. So we de-SEO'd them.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Exactly.
Why is that something that I've never heard before? It seems like everyone is just about optimizing and getting more traffic, but I've not heard this angle much.
Maybe that's because we invented this term like a week ago.
Oh, yeah, but no, I mean, even the concept at hand, like having less traffic on your pages, is something that I haven't seen much chatter about.
Is the term like qualified traffic, like the traffic that you want to be coming to your site is like actually the people that will convert? So if you have like a job posting page or something, like you don't want everyone applying to your job for being a developer advocate at Google. If it's like the #1 job position, like you will just have way too many people applying that are not necessarily like the right fit for it. But if you're showing up for something that is like more filtered down, then maybe the applicants are actually going to be the people that apply. So you don't necessarily want all the traffic for that kind of thing. You want like the people that would be actually applying for the position.
And technically, you are still just optimizing. You are not de-optimizing. You are optimizing for the right kind of traffic or the right target audience.
I have heard qualified traffic beforehand, but I haven't really seen as much conversation about it as just like people coming to me saying like, oh, we lost impressions. And then I said, yeah, but did you lose clicks or did you lose conversions? And they could usually not even answer the question because they don't really look at it. So is it maybe also a problem that people are looking at the wrong things?
I think there are multiple facets to this. One is that when the SEO works for a larger company, like they are an in-house or long contract SEO company, and the company they work for wants to measure success based on impressions. And then you want to grab as much traffic as possible, which I think is wrong, but that's how it is. And then they are optimizing for generic keywords and trying to catch as many impressions as possible. And another aspect to this is when the SEO just doesn't know that they shouldn't optimize for generic keywords. And I encountered this. Do you remember those times when we still went to conferences, like in person?
Mm-hmm.
Like when back in the old days.
We're still black and white.
Yeah, like back in the good old days. I loved the hallway discussions and people just coming up and asking questions. And I encountered it so many times where people were like, okay, I want to grab more traffic because I want to grow my website. It's like, then if I told them that, well, you are growing your website with the wrong kind of audience, or you are not even growing your website because you are getting the wrong kind of audience. Like if you just want to rank for pi, for example, the Greek letter pi, and you're getting traffic for apple pie, that's the wrong kind of audience. They are not going to be interested in your Greek letter pi. And it's very hard to accept that because in most folks' mentality, and also in mine, impressions and clicks translates to success.
You know, it's interesting that you phrase it that way because it seems like we're almost approaching the goal differently for some of these things. So for de-SEOing, I could also see it fitting for our like the site move, site rebranding thing. Like you might want to have the goal that I want to de-optimize for the old name for the thing. So for example, our clicks or impressions for Webmaster, like it's actually good that we see the clicks going down for that because we removed the term everywhere. Like we don't necessarily want that, but we also validated it from looking at other sources. So from like Keyword Planner or trends to make sure like the search interest for that thing is also going down. So it's not that it's like, oh, it just went over somewhere else. Like this thing is actually going down, but like the approach from the beginning is that the goal is different, that we'd want to see the traffic going down for that. And that's what it means to have a successful rebrand, that people went and did this other thing instead.
I think rebranding is even more complex than just like the SEOing things, because you also have to employ some marketing and quite rigid guidelines about what you can do with the old name and what you cannot do with the new name in order for people to forget the old name and stop using it. And I imagine that it is very hard. Like people are like elephants. They don't forget easily. And some people might even call Search Console Webmaster Tools sometimes. I'm looking at myself here. Oh no, that's Martin. Sorry.
No.
Oh, fine, it's me. It is hard.
Yeah, I think that if you were just looking at like our Search Console analytics and you saw the clicks going down, you'd be like, well, people still search for Webmaster, so why is the click going down for this keyword? Like, oh no, panic, when actually that might be a metric for success for a certain project.
Talking about metrics and success for a while now, how did you validate if it worked or not?
Yes. Good question. So we did see the traffic go down. So from before, in the before times, before we noticed that this was an issue and then made changes, we were getting 40% of our traffic from organic search to this removals page. After we changed the content on the page to be more targeted towards the website audience, the traffic dropped to 20% from organic. But we were still, like I checked again yesterday, we're still not having like the numbers that I would like in terms for the satisfaction. So people are still upset. And one of the things that I think that we could do is to look at the other sources, like where people are coming from, because the next thing, well, it's now the biggest piece of the pie, like where people are coming from for this document is other Google help centers. So support.google.com is like the main referral source. So my next idea is to look at like, what is the context that people are coming from over there, like, and it's all within the larger company, so the call is coming from within the house. Like, what is the context that they're coming to us, and are they being set up for failure? Like, when are they expecting something else when they're coming over here? So Gary, if you recall, I think I asked you about this, and then you sent me this massive spreadsheet with links. I don't know how you found them, but that is the next thing, is to sort of do like cold calling, door to door, like look at this link, like how are they linking to us, and is it in the context of like a general removal or is it website facing?
I think I got that from Search Console actually, or some similar tool.
You mean Webmaster Tools?
Yeah, Webmaster Tools.
So sort of like to answer your question, like it was sort of a success, or at least from the de-optimizing or de-SEOing, we did lower it to like an appropriate amount. And we also saw the number of people who are writing into us, like we're not getting so many requests that are what we would consider to be consumer facing, where people are like, remove this Instagram page of me, or like this picture of me, like personal queries. So to me, that means that we're not having that huge influx, but the problem is not completely gone away.
Right. So it's a work in progress still. But are there any lessons you learned from the process and the outcomes, like what has changed, that you would want past Lizzi to know, or you will make sure future Lizzi to apply? Is there anything that you would say like that's a good strategy to avoid being in this position in the first place? Yes,
that's a good question, because we did inherit this article. So sort of it's been like a cleanup effort to go and tidy up things from the migration, where we brought in a bunch of documents to sort of tighten them up and make sure the flow is good. But this also made me think about when we write new articles, to make sure that they're more targeted. So, because we have the opportunity to just write something that is generic, but then it's not differentiated enough to show the value for what this page is about. So, for example, we just published an article for Safe Search and your website. And I was thinking about this when we wrote the title, because there is another Safe Search article that's like how to turn it on, like the filter, how to use it from a consumer standpoint, and our document is not that. So approaching it from like, how can we make sure our document doesn't run into this problem again?
I see. So you want to avoid being too general and too generic to not attract the kind of traffic that you don't want to. And it sounds like it's mostly a content writing or like copywriting thing and copy rewriting thing. Are there other aspects to this?
Well, first, content writing, copywriting is a big chunk of SEO. Pretty much all search engines work on the basis of content, like the actual content. So if you mess up, I just had an idea. Have you ever heard a term, content is king?
Yes.
Why do you think that term exists?
Well, I guess because content really matters.
Yeah, because it's the basis on which search engines operate. Basically, they are looking at token/keywords in the content, and they rank based on those keywords they found.
No way. That's wild. I thought it's purely based on domain name.
No, that's just Lizzi's word. Content is pretty much the important thing here. So once you start de-optimizing the content and the title and the description doesn't matter all that much, then you are going to see benefits and you are going to start attracting probably better traffic if you did a good job, like Lizzi did.
But I was thinking that there is probably other stuff that's not just changing the content on the page.
I just
for
said
example,
that's the most important
well,
thing.
You didn't get to the epiphany part. So it's one thing that we've been talking about is, sorry, is our blog content and how we have since we've migrated all of our blogs into one house, onesie, where everything lives now, we are seeing people coming to these old blog posts and then saying like, hey, like you wrote this thing about also localization or like what to do with my regional content in this blog post from like 2008. Is this still relevant? But you also have this document over here that is an evergreen page. Like, who do I listen to? What do I do here? What do you think about that?
Well, it depends. Sometimes in a blog, you can explain things in a much friendlier tone than in developer documentation, because in the developer documentation, we want to keep a very professional sort of language, while in the blog, we could be more verbose and more explainy, I guess. So sometimes having the blog as well is a good thing, but then there are other blog posts that became obsolete, for example.
Right, like with something that's been deprecated, or maybe we then, like, we wrote it in a blog post first, and then we went and wrote documentation. Like, for example, your dynamic rendering blog post, Martin, like you initially wrote it in more of a code lab casual tone, and then you turned it into a different page. So now we have two things, like, is this a duplicate content issue? And if someone were to search for dynamic rendering and they see all these posts, like, do we have a problem or no?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think in this specific case, we don't really have a problem and it's not really duplicate content, even though some of it is probably a duplication of the content. Generally speaking, the blog post was more of a here's how to do it, kind of step-by-step guide on implementing it. And then the general document is more like a why would you do this? Why would you need that? What are the background reasons for even thinking about implementing it? And I think both of them link out to the same step-by-step code lab where people can get hands-on experience in implementing dynamic rendering. But yeah, I can see how neither of these might be optimized for their specific intention. I think there is an overlap that is tricky to navigate.
Yeah, or over time, one becomes like the main place where we'd want people to go to find the answer, but we want to retain something on the blog from like just for historical purposes. Like there was a record that we published this thing and then we improved it and made it better and published it over here. And we don't necessarily want to get rid of the blog post, but how do we direct people? Is this an angle where de-SEOing would help? Because maybe our blog post is getting more traffic when we would actually like this new and improved code lab to be getting the traffic. So should we be doing something like no indexing the blog post and then pointing people over there so that we are sort of trying to guide people to the right page?
I think no index is a very harsh way of removing content, especially if the content is tightly related to something that you published, like an evergreen page on Docs. So rel canonical, for example, would be a much better fit in these cases that we mentioned.
Why?
Because then you are telling search engines that this piece of content is actually there, but you also let the user read both of them. With a redirect, like if you set up a 301, 302, 308, whatever redirect, then you are stripping the possibility away from the user to read the original page. And sometimes that makes sense. Like, for example, if they are one-to-one copy, it doesn't make sense to have both live anymore. But if you have, like in Martin's case, you have a blog post that has very friendly tone, code lab sort of thing, or Y thing, or I was not paying attention because it's dynamic rendering. And then you have the actual documentation. They are two different pieces of content. They are tightly related. And then if Martin decided that maybe we don't need a blog post anymore, there it would make more sense to link the blog post to the documentation.
Having talked about the things that we de-SEO'd, like the dynamic rendering situation that we might want to look into, but having worked on removals and other things and safe search, is there anything else that you can see is definitely a target for future work where you say like, oh, these dogs definitely need an overhaul now that you know how to spot bad traffic or unwanted traffic?
I keep seeing feedback about some YouTube videos and YouTube channels and whatnot, and I want to figure out why people are coming there to the specific page that they are landing on. I don't think it's critical because it's not as bad as it was with the removals page where we got several pieces of feedback every.
Yeah, this one seems kind of random where people will say like, I'm locked out of my YouTube account, or like, I can't access Google search, or like these types of queries that are like, okay, like, how did you get here? And there isn't like an obvious pattern. Whereas with the removals thing, it was like, we could see immediately that it was like, yes, this removals page is getting this type, whereas these queries seem to show up randomly across our entire site. So like, it's not, okay, you're making a face.
I'm always making a face.
Do you see a pattern? You already know what page it is that is the culprit?
It's the videos page. The videos page is getting YouTube traffic.
Yes, that is a problem because I think we're ranking for some really generic query. Video, like, is the keyword that we're ranking for, which is like, how would we undo that?
I don't know, but we have to look into it.
We have to look into it. Oh, okay, so that's the answer. We will look into it and get back to you.
Okay, looking forward to hear what else we want to optimize for more specific queries rather than. But it's interesting that we get random YouTube queries.
I mean, the queries themselves, they are more generic than just YouTube. And somehow we managed to capture it. I haven't looked into how. And it's also kind of annoying because when we are looking into how people reach those pages, I could use the internal tools. It would be very simple to do it. Like I could just hit up the debug interfaces that we have and tools and just look at how it happens. But we can't do that. We actually have to use the same tools that anyone else external to Google has to use or could use. And it's very annoying because the information is less, obviously. I know why it's less than what we have internally. It's still annoying. But yeah, we will have to figure it out with Search Console and other similar tools.
But isn't this a beautiful opportunity to make these tools better? Okay, sorry for even asking. I feel dumb for asking now.
Aw, don't let Gary make you feel that way.
High five.
Thanks for being nice. So Gary, will you make me some pie in the near future?
Yes. Anytime you want. Just give me an hour heads up or something like that.
An hour to make a pie?
That's really fast.
I can make a pie very fast.
Okay. Next week, Martin, we'll give him a 1 hour heads up and test this theory. See if it checks out. Mm-hmm.
So I think That's it for this episode. Thanks a lot for joining us here, folks. And next time on Search of the Record, we'll be chatting about structured data with fellow software engineer Ryan Levering. We've been having fun with these podcast episodes, and we hope that you, the listener, have found them both entertaining and insightful too. Feel free to drop us a note on Twitter at Google Search C, or chat with us at one of the next virtual events, or who knows, maybe even real events we go to if you have any thoughts. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.